From the moment Darius stepped into the bank, the energy in the room shifted. It wasn't loud. No alarms. No guests. Just quiet glances. A few subtle whispers. Eyes moving from screens to the man in the black Nike Tech tracksuit walking across polished marble floors. Darius didn't flinch. He knew how this would go. He'd been in rooms like this before. Places that smiled in your face while measuring your worth behind it. Places where skin tone, clothes, and confidence made people uncomfortable, even when you were the one with money in your pocket. But he had business to handle. Serious business. He clutched the envelope in his hand as he walked toward the teller booths. Inside was a check worth more than what most people in that room made in a year. His reward for closing the biggest consulting deal of his life. Years of late nights, cold calls, and proving himself had finally paid off. He wasn't about to let anyone ruin this moment. He stepped up to the counter, where a woman with stiff blonde curls and an even stiffer expression sat beneath a nameplate that read Cynthia M. Her smile didn't move when he greeted her. "Good morning," Darius said, sliding the check under the glass. Cynthia didn't respond. She just looked at him. Not the polite kind of look, but the kind that tried to figure out what someone like him was doing in a place like this. Her eyes dropped to the check. Then they narrowed. "Do you have an account with us, sir?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut ice. "No," Darius said calmly. "But the check is drawn from your bank. I was told I could either deposit it or cash it here." Cynthia tapped her fingers on the counter and picked up the check. Her eyes scanned it once, then twice. Her eyebrows arched. "This is quite a sum," she muttered, still not looking him in the eye. "Where exactly did you get this?" Darius kept his tone even. "It's payment for a consulting contract. The company's legit. I have documents if you need them." Cynthia didn't respond. She didn't even nod. Instead, she stood up from her chair and turned without a word, walking straight into the back office with the check in hand. Darius let out a slow breath and glanced around. The bank was quiet again, but not normal quiet. Staring quiet. An older man in a suit by the loan desk kept glancing his way. A security guard near the exit had casually repositioned himself, so he had a clear line of sight. Darius sat down and folded his hands. He'd done nothing wrong. Still, he felt like he was on trial. 10 minutes passed. 15. And then Cynthia returned with company. A middle-aged man in a navy blue blazer and an overly rehearsed smile walked beside her. His badge read, "Richard, Branch Manager." "Sir," Richard said smoothly, "we need to verify the origin of this check. It's a large amount, and our policy requires certain procedures for non-account holders. I'm sure you understand." Darius nodded, slow and deliberate. "I do. But let me guess, you only started caring about those procedures after you saw me wearing a tracksuit." Richard hesitated. Just for a second. Cynthia didn't even try to hide her scowl. "This has nothing to do with people like you," Cynthia interrupted. "Always have a story. Always a reason. And usually, it doesn't check out." The bank fell into an even deeper silence. Darius leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice calm. "You don't know me," he said. "You don't know what I've built or what I've been through. That check? I earned it. Every penny. But you already decided I don't belong here, didn't you?" Richard tried to interrupt. "Let's not escalate this." Darius held up a hand. "No need. Go ahead. Run the check. Call whoever you need to call. I'll wait." He sat back and crossed his arms. Let them dig. Let them doubt. Because what none of them knew, not Cynthia, not Richard, not the people staring like he'd walked in with a ski mask, was that this check was real. The business was real. And he wasn't just going to prove them wrong. He was going to make sure they never forgot the day they underestimated the man in the tracksuit. The bank manager, Richard, gave one of those tight-lipped smiles meant to look polite but felt more like a warning. "We'll just be a few minutes," he said, nodding at Cynthia, who was already storming off with a check like she'd just uncovered a national security threat. Darius didn't move. He could have pulled out his phone, could have scrolled, called someone. But he didn't. He just watched. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than anger. And Cynthia? She was loud even when she didn't talk. Back behind the glass, she vanished again, into a restricted hallway behind the teller windows. Richard followed close behind. Meanwhile, the other employees began whispering to each other. A young teller 3 windows over leaned toward her coworker and murmured, "Did you see them out?" The other nodded and glanced at Darius with something between curiosity and judgment. It was the same look he'd seen all his life. Though what's someone like him doing with that kind of money? Look. Outside, people walked by with lattes and briefcases, unaware of the storm brewing in that marble-floored bank lobby. Inside, Darius sat still, remembering every long night that got him here. The failed businesses, the empty bank accounts, the lectures about how guys from his neighborhood never make it, never amount to much. He'd proven them all wrong. But apparently that still wasn't enough. 15 more minutes passed, and then Cynthia returned with a different energy this time. She walked faster, her face flushed, and she wasn't alone. She had the fraud investigator with her now. A tall woman in a gray pantsuit, tablet in hand. She walked straight up to Darius, glanced at the bench, and said, "Mr. Darius," he said calmly. "Mr. Darius," she repeated, eyeing him like she was sizing up a suspect. "We've reviewed the check. We've contacted the issuing company. But we're going to need you to answer a few questions before we can proceed." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She glanced down at her screen. "Can you tell us what services you provided to this company?" "Business consulting," he replied. "I helped them scale their online systems. Boosted revenue by over 40% in 6 months. They paid me what we agreed on. And you have proof of this engagement?" "I do," Darius said. He reached into his backpack slowly, deliberately, because he knew how fast movements could be misread, and pulled out a sleek black folder. Inside were contracts, emails, even signed invoices. She flipped through it. Cynthia stood behind her, arms crossed, still sneering. "He probably forged all that," Cynthia muttered under her breath, but loud enough for Darius to hear. He looked right at her. "I'm sorry, do you always assume your customers are criminals, or is that just a me thing?" The fraud investigator raised her hand, silencing Cynthia. Her brows knit as she read through the documents. Then she picked up her phone and stepped away, speaking in hushed tones. Darius exhaled through his nose. He wasn't angry yet. He was measured, steady, but the temperature in his chest was rising, because this wasn't about a check anymore. This was about how easy it was to reduce a man to nothing just because of what he wore, or the color of his skin, or the fact that he didn't come in with a Rolex and a blazer. And that made him dangerous in their eyes. After another 10 minutes, the investigator returned. This time, her tone was different, more careful. "Mr. Darius," she said, "we spoke directly with the CFO of the issuing company. They confirmed your work and your compensation. Everything checks out." She paused, as if waiting for him to thank her for believing facts. Darius didn't move. He just stared at Cynthia. Her face had turned red, but she still didn't apologize. Instead, she mumbled something about due diligence and protocol. The manager stepped in again, trying to smooth things over. "Thank you for your patience, Mr. Darius," Richard said, as if this had all been a minor inconvenience. "We'll begin processing your funds right away." Darius stood, slow, calm, controlled. "You know," he said, looking Richard dead in the eye, "if I had walked in here in a suit, would any of this have happened?" Richard hesitated. Didn't answer. Didn't need to. Darius turned to Cynthia. "You treated me like a criminal. Like I didn't belong here. But you never asked yourself the real question." He leaned in slightly. "What does it say about you that a successful black man in a tracksuit is more threatening to you than a broke man in a tie?" And with that, he walked away. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the bank hadn't just insulted a man. They'd insulted a businessman with reach. And what happened next? That's when the real storm hit. Darius walked out of that bank with a sense of calm that only came from years of practice. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't angry. He was just done. The doors swung open, and he stepped into the bright sunlight, the weight of the moment sinking in. In that lobby, they had seen him. But outside, the world would see them. He didn't say anything to anyone. He didn't need to. His tracksuit felt like armor now. Not a symbol of casual comfort, but of quiet rebellion. The same afternoon, Darius took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. He wasn't going to let this slide. First, he took a picture of the bank's logo on the front door and uploaded it to social media. No caption, just the image. People knew what was coming. He didn't stop there. He went straight to the local news sites, then posted a brief, professional message. Earlier today, I went to a well-known bank in downtown city name to cash a business check I earned through my consulting work. What followed was a series of interactions that were unprofessional, humiliating, and downright disrespectful. I was treated like a criminal and assumed to be unqualified simply because of the way I looked. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and this is a reminder that success isn't always visible. I will be taking legal action if necessary. He had sinned. And then he waited. It didn't take long for the post to catch fire. The comments poured in fast. People from all walks of life, not just his followers, but strangers too. They saw themselves in him. Black, brown, or anyone who had ever been judged for what they wore, what they looked like, or the color of their skin. They knew that feeling. Within an hour, a local journalist had messaged him for an interview. Darius agreed, and by the next day, the story was all over the news. The headline, "Bank Under Fire for Racist Treatment of Local Entrepreneur." And the story? It was everywhere. Television stations ran footage of the bank, contrasting the glamorous exterior with Darius's calm, controlled statement about his experience. The clips of him walking out of the building, shoulders squared, head held high, were shared thousands of times. People were outraged, but they were also inspired. Social media erupted. One tweet went viral with the hashtag #TracksuitTruth. Darius had unintentionally started a movement. It wasn't about the tracksuit anymore. It was about what it represented. He had become the face of every person who had been discriminated against for their appearance, their race, or their financial status. Then came the videos. People began sharing their own stories, recounting how they'd been judged based on their looks, some at banks, some at restaurants, some at work. One woman posted about being turned away from a high-end store because they assumed she couldn't afford the clothes she wanted to buy. It was a collective uprising, and Darius was at the center of it all. Back at the bank, Cynthia had no idea what was coming. She had been smug, thinking this was just another regular day of running her world. The minute she had seen him walk out, she had assumed that was the last she'd see of him. He was just another guy in a tracksuit who would slink off quietly after being humiliated. But they had underestimated him. They underestimated all of them. That night, the bank's customer service line was flooded with complaints. People started posting screenshots of their own negative experiences. Word spread quickly, and soon enough, the bank was forced to issue a public statement. "We sincerely apologize for the incident that took place at our city name branch. We take these matters seriously and are investigating this issue. Our customers deserve to feel valued, respected, and treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance." It wasn't an apology. It was a damage control tactic. But the damage had been done. Darius wasn't done yet. The next day, he called his lawyer. Legal action was on the table now. He had the funds. He had the public support. And he had the story. The bank had no idea what was coming. But he wasn't just after money. He wasn't just after an apology. What he wanted was for this story to be a warning for anyone who thought they could judge people based on their appearance. What happened to him wasn't just personal. It was a sign of a bigger problem. He wanted change, and he was ready to fight for it. The courtroom was packed. The kind of packed that made the air feel thick, like something big was about to happen. Darius stood at the front, his lawyer beside him, both calm and collected. Across from them, the bank's legal team looked uneasy. They had underestimated him before, and now they were facing the consequences. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, glanced at both parties before speaking. "Let's get to the point. Mr. Darius, you're accusing this bank of racial discrimination. What evidence do you have?" Darius took a deep breath, then stood tall. "I have the posts, the viral videos, and the testimonies of hundreds of people who have shared their own stories of discrimination at this bank. Not to mention the recorded footage of my experience, the emails, and the witnesses." The bank's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Darius knew the truth was on his side. The judge nodded. "We'll review the evidence. But remember, we're here to find the truth, not just assign blame." The trial continued, but the tide was turning. As the bank's defense crumbled under cross-examination, The truth became undeniable. This wasn't just about a single incident, it was a systemic issue. The bank had a pattern of profiling clients based on their appearance, and the public knew it. The bank's lawyers tried to settle, but Darius wasn't having it. "I'm not looking for a payout. I'm looking for change," he told them firmly. The judge ruled in his favor. The bank was ordered to pay restitution, change their policies, and issue a public apology. But for Darius, it was about something deeper. He had made sure their reputation would never recover.